Okay, so jaywalking. Let's get into it. It feels like, such a minor thing, right?
Totally.
Just stepping off the curb because you're in a rush or the light is taking forever. But the sources we looked at, wow, they paint a completely different picture.
They really do. This seemingly simple act is a massive factor in traffic fatalities, and it has these huge ripple effects we don't even think about.
Right. And that's our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We want to go way beyond the basic definition and really understand three things.
Hmm.
First, what actually makes jaywalking so statistically dangerous? Second, what are the legal and psychological consequences? And finally, why do we do it? And where did that very strange word, jaywalking, even come from?
It's a crucial topic because it really gets at how our cities are designed and who they're designed for. So let's start with the basics. What are we actually talking about here?
Exactly. So for legal clarity, what is the official definition of jaywalking in these guides?
Well, broadly, it's just a pedestrian crossing a street in an unlawful or unsafe way. But the sources break it down into a few common types.
Okay.
You've got mid-block crossings, which is probably the one everyone thinks of. Then there's ignoring a crosswalk, even if it's right there.
Right.
And, of course, crossing against a red light or a don't walk sign, or, this is a big one, just darting out into traffic suddenly.
And when you look at the crash data, the immediate danger really boils down to one thing, doesn't it? The element of surprise.
Precisely. That is the core danger.
Yeah.
Drivers are just not conditioned to expect a person to appear in the middle of a block.
Their eyes are trained on intersections, on crosswalks.
Exactly. So when a jaywalker steps out, they violate that expectation, and that just, it guts the driver's ability to react in time.
And that reaction time is everything. We're talking fractions of a second.
We are. A car moving at, say, 30 miles an hour covers a lot of ground before the driver can even process the threat, let alone hit the brakes. Jaywalking completely erases that safety buffer.
So if a collision does happen, the outcome is just way worse.
Absolutely. The sources are really clear on this. Pedestrians hit at higher speeds, which is more likely outside a crosswalk, are far more likely to be seriously injured or killed.
Right.
You lose all the protection of the traffic signals.
But it's not just about the immediate physical danger. You mentioned these ripple effects.
Yes, and they impact everyone. Jaywalkers inject uncertainty into the whole system.
So you mean drivers slamming on their brakes, swerving?
Right. It creates all this erratic driving, which disrupts traffic flow for everyone and causes delays. But what I found really interesting was the focus on the psychological impact.
On the drivers.
Yes, on the drivers. Even if they're not at fault, being involved in an accident like that can cause severe psychological trauma. We're talking PTSD, anxiety, real guilt.
Then even if there's no accident, just the constant stress of being on high alert for jaywalkers, that has to take a toll.
It does. It just adds to driver fatigue and anxiety, and that high vigilance becomes almost impossible under certain conditions,
Like at night.
especially at night. We have to pause on this one statistic from the NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
Okay.
They reported that a staggering 76% of pedestrian fatalities in 2020 happened in the dark.
76%. That's almost unbelievable.
It is. So jaywalking in poor lighting, or fog, or rain, it drastically increases the chance a driver just won't see you.
Until it's way, way too late.
Exactly.
So let's shift to the legal side of things. Is jaywalking actually a crime?
Legally speaking, no, not really. It's generally classified as a minor offense. Think of it as an infraction or a violation.
So it's on the same level as a parking ticket, basically.
That's a great comparison. You get a citation, you pay a fine, but you're not facing jail time. It's not a misdemeanor or a felony.
And what do those fines typically look like? Are we talking a slap on the wrist?
It varies wildly. In some places, it might be nominal, $20 to $50, more of an educational tool. But in other areas, it can get pretty substantial, well over $100.
And I imagine if an accident does happen, figuring out who's liable must be a nightmare.
It's incredibly complex. It's almost never clear-cut. The sources talk a lot about something called comparative negligence.
Okay, so break that down for us.
Sure. Let's say a pedestrian darts out mid-block. Clearly, they've broken the law.
Right.
But maybe an investigation shows the driver was also texting while driving and going 20 miles over the speed limit.
Ah, so both people were being reckless.
Exactly. So a court might find both parties partially at fault. The driver could still be liable for a percentage of the pedestrian's medical bills, even though the pedestrian made the first mistake.
That's a vital piece of context. Now, are there any exceptions? Like, is it ever actually legal to cross outside a crosswalk?
Yes, but they're very limited and specific. The most obvious one is an emergency. You're escaping a fire or some other immediate danger.
Makes sense.
Another one is if there are simply no nearby crosswalks. If a safe crossing isn't reasonably available, some local laws might permit it.
And what if the traffic light is just broken, stuck on red forever?
That's the third one, a malfunctioning signal. You can cross, but you have to do it with extreme caution.
All of this really brings us back to the statistics. When you zoom out, the data just screams how dangerous this is.
The numbers are sobering. The World Health Organization reports over 270,000 pedestrian deaths a year globally.
Wow.
That's about 22% of all road deaths.
And when you drill down specifically into jaywalking type behavior,
The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, the IIHS, found that about 60% of pedestrian deaths in urban areas happen outside of crosswalks.
60%. So the majority of people who die as pedestrians in cities were not in a designated crossing area.
That's the reality. It is the single highest risk location. And we also have to talk about impairment.
Alcohol.
Yes. The NHTSA found that 32% of pedestrians killed in 2019 had a blood alcohol content of 0.08 or higher.
That is a huge slice of the pie. And the data also pointed to some really vulnerable groups, right?
It did. Older adults, so people 65 and up, accounted for 20% of the fatalities. And tragically, kids under 15 made up 17% of the injuries.
So knowing all this, the legal risks, the physical danger, it really begs the question, why do we still do it?
Well, the most obvious answer, according to the sources, is just pure convenience.
The shortest path from point A to point B?
Right. Saving a few seconds, not wanting to wait for a long light, but blaming it all on impatience kind of misses a bigger systemic problem.
The infrastructure itself.
Exactly. A lack of enough crosswalks or signals that take forever to change, especially on these wide, multi-lane roads. If the safe choice is the super inconvenient choice, people will naturally take the shortcut.
That makes perfect sense. Human behavior is always going to default to efficiency.
Precisely. And that's not even counting poorly maintained infrastructure like faded crosswalk lines that nobody can see.
Then you have the psychological side of it, the idea of normalization.
If you do it every day and nothing bad happens, it just becomes a habit. And when you see everyone else doing it too,
It reinforces the idea that it's okay, that it's low risk.
even when the statistics show it absolutely is not. And sometimes it's just a lack of awareness of local laws or how long it actually takes a 2-ton vehicle to stop.
But this is where it gets, I think, really fascinating. The origin of the word jaywalking itself. This wasn't just some neutral safety term someone came up with.
Not at all. It was created in the early 20th century and, well, it was weaponized.
So you have to picture it, right? Cities are suddenly flooded with cars sharing streets that used to just be for people and horses.
Total chaos. Before cars, pedestrians basically had the right of way everywhere.
So how did they solve that conflict?
They engineered a cultural shift. The word jay in early American English was already an insult.
What did it mean?
It was slang for someone from the countryside who was, naive or foolish, a country bumpkin.
Like calling someone a hick today.
Exactly like that. So when auto industry advocates started popularizing the term jaywalking, they weren't just describing an action, they were attaching an insult to it.
They were using language to shift the blame.
Precisely. The term was a PR campaign in a single word. It was designed to publicly shame the pedestrian, to label them as foolish for being in the street. It moved all the responsibility onto the individual to adapt to the car.
Wow. So every time we use that word, we're kind of unknowingly participating in this century-old campaign to push people off the roads.
That historical context is so critical for understanding how we should try to prevent it today. So what do we do about it?
Well, first we have to remember it also causes secondary accidents.
Yeah.
The chain reactions when one driver slams on the brakes.
Right. So the sources all agree prevention has to be this holistic approach. It's a mix of infrastructure, education, and enforcement. You can't just pick one.
Let's start with infrastructure. What needs to change in our cities?
We need more frequent, high-visibility crosswalks. And crucially, we need pedestrian signals with countdown timers.
Oh, those are so important. They tell you exactly how much time you have.
They reduce that anxiety and impatience. We also need audible signals for the visually impaired. And we have to talk about vehicle speed.
Right. How do you do that?
Through what's called traffic calming measures. This is key. It means using physical design to slow cars down.
So things like speed bumps.
Speed bumps, raised crosswalks, or even narrowing the lanes. Something called a road diet, where you might take a 4-lane road down to 2 It physically and psychologically makes drivers slow down.
And then there's education, obviously.
Vital. Social media campaigns, infographics, and especially school programs that teach kids safe habits early on before the bad ones set in.
The sources also mention some really cool new technology.
Yeah, the idea of smart crosswalks. They use sensors that detect a pedestrian and then activate flashing lights embedded in the pavement to warn drivers.
So it tackles that core problem of unexpected presence.
It does. And finally, you have enforcement. It has to be part of the mix, but the sources really caution against relying on it too heavily.
Why is that?
Well, targeted enforcement in high-risk areas can work. But if it's your only tool, you're just punishing the behavior without fixing the root cause.
Which might be that the nearest crosswalk is a quarter-mile away.
Exactly. You're not solving the infrastructure problem.
So, to sum it all up, jaywalking is so much more than a shortcut. It's this high-risk act driven by bad design, impatience, and it's all wrapped up in this historical term designed to make pedestrians feel foolish.
Right. And understanding that means real safety improvements come from redesigning our cities to make the safe choice the easiest choice.
And this brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. The source materials mention that high rates of jaywalking can sometimes lead to less investment in pedestrian infrastructure.
How so?
Because city resources get diverted to enforcement, to paying for police officers to write tickets, instead of to engineers to build the crosswalks and countdown timers that are needed.
And it brings up this really important question, right? If that cycle of enforcement actually takes money away from long-term safety investments.
Are we kind of trapping ourselves? Where the unsafe behavior just keeps happening because the safe option is never actually built, because it remains too inconvenient.
What do you think is the critical point of intervention? Is it the design of the street itself, the law, or maybe challenging the cultural history of that one derogatory word? Something to think about the next time you hesitate before stepping off that curb.
Please like, subscribe, and get notified.